Good morning. It is Friday the 13th of February. I'm Maeve McMahon and this is Europe Today, your daily dose of European news and analysis. Coming up, Ursula von der Leyen and Emmanuel Macron have set a June deadline to unblock important economic reforms. Or they say smaller groups of EU member states will have to move forward on their own. That was the main outcome of yesterday's gathering in Belgium. There was a sense of urgency in the air, but stark divisions remain on the issue of joint debt, with the German Chancellor clearly saying 9. Euronews' EU editor Marie Tadeo was on the ground and had the chance to speak exclusively to the President of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, and she started by asking her for her view on how to boost the European economy.
We have a narrow opportunity before the March European Council to have concrete outcomes and a timeline. Those who have said that for far too long the European Union talks a lot and have not come with actions are now needing to be disproved. So all the proposals on the table, no matter how different they might be, at the end of the day, they ask to do more. They ask to do more now. If you look back to the last few months of 2025, when there was an agreement between the European Commission, the Parliament and the Council on 10 legislative priorities, these need to be backed up by a full commitment on the Capital Markets Union, on the Banking Union, Savings and Investments Union, the Energy Union, all of these big words, but ultimately they boil down to legislative initiatives that will make it easier in Europe for you to invest, for you to grow, to innovate and scale up.
So what do you want to see?
Well, 2026 is going to be the year where we need to save the automotive industry. 2, we need to shore up where we are market leaders. 3, we need to conclude more trade deals. We're doing this already. We've seen what happened with the US, with India, different trade deals on the table that we need to, in Parliament, also vote on. This is the year where we no longer say we might do it next year. We need to vote this year. And we're already going through that.
The head of the Commission, she talked about a commission that is committed to providing that executive action, but she also said that co-legislators really need to do their part. Do you view that as criticism that the European Parliament is not playing its role?
Absolutely not. If anything, it is a common call to action, just as the European Parliament has asked for a long time for the Commission to come forward with simplification proposals. We now have the proposals on the table and we're working pretty fast on them.
Mario Draghi was in attendance to this retreat. It's been almost 2 years since that report came out. What makes you think that this is really the time? And what makes you think that it will come to fruition? Because many would argue it's 2 years late and the money question is still not solved.
Well, if you think about this simplification drive and what we're currently working on, all of this comes, if you will, from the Draghi and Letta reports. Do we need to go further? Absolutely. We're talking about 800 billion euros that are injected into the European economy every year. What are we doing on that? Are we going to manage to save the industries where we are market leaders? This is what 2026 is about. And this is the discussion that it's not only Mario Draghi having with the European leaders, but every single leader of a company in Europe, every single family, but also every citizen that would like his and her bills to go down lower for us to be able to make it easier for them to live. And I think it's a common discussion across the continent. Perhaps in the past we would have waited a little bit longer. Now's the time because we have no choice.
And the question of the Eurobonds, is that something that you think it should be explored? And then secondly, Mario Draghi has talked about this pragmatic federal union. Is that something you can rally behind, a form of federal Europe, pragmatic federal Europe?
Well, first of all, we've never been against member states going further. We've had it with the Schengen area. We've seen it with the euro in different areas. This is not an obstacle or a shortcut to unity. Rather, it's a pathway to unity. That's number one. The second thing is, what are we going to do to decrease the productivity gap that we have? At the end of the day, the arguments are weighed between whether you increase the financing in our economies by capital. At the end of the day, we have savings in the European Union. It's the tools that we use that need to promote growth. And on the other hand, how are we going to pull up those member states that still see a big gap in their productivity level? This is all one that needs to be coming together, because as a union, the better we are together, the better economically we can do.
President Metsola there. And now many EU leaders have left Belgium and moved on to Bavaria as the Munich Security Conference gets underway. the biggest security conference in the world, takes place in a context of what organisers call a new era of wrecking ball politics. For more, let's cross over now to Munich and bring in our Maria Tadeo. Maria, good morning. What should we expect here? Some big names on the guest list.
Well, yes, Maeve, good morning from Munich. Of course, the eyes of the world, to some extent, will be fixated on the city because of the names, the caliber of the speakers that participate. A U.S. delegation led by Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, who's now become the sort of brains, but also the operator of U.S. foreign policy. President Zelensky will also address the Munich Security Conference. Remember, he has often used this tribune to really show the priorities for Ukraine, but also the needs for the country. He warned about a war that was coming. Then obviously the war broke out, and ever since he's used this conference to appeal for aid, for more weapons, but also now at this stage, it really is about the active negotiations that are taking place between the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine. Of course, we're expecting a number of bilateral meetings to take place between the Ukrainians and the U.S. delegation. On top of that, of course, is the Europeans. As you alluded to that, the head of the Commission will be here, the French president too, and of course the host country, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, will also address the Munich Security Conference. For the Europeans, the mission is twofold. One is really show the world now that this is a union that is taking its security seriously, that it can and will protect itself. Obviously, there are questions about the capabilities that Europe really is able to deploy, I should note, alone without the United States, and also insert itself into the negotiations on Ukraine. That will be really the mission for the Europeans, to use 3 days of shuttle diplomacy to send a message, but also really the negotiations that happen behind the scenes. That is really the value of a conference like this, is the sidelines, the FaceTime between leaders.
And just briefly, Maria, remember last year J.D. Vance gave a speech that shocked Europeans. Could we see more of that this year?
Well, he did very much. And Maeve, just to give you an anecdote, a year ago I was here at the Munich Security Conference and I watched that speech by the U.S. Vice President next to a very senior European official who went, "Oh, wow, they hate us." And by hate us, it means the Europeans. At the time, remember, the U.S. Vice President said that the big threat for Europe is not coming external, it's coming from within, and alluded to climate, migration, censorship. Obviously, that signaled a rupture in policy between the two sides. This time around, he will not participate. It is Marco Rubio. Some believe this perhaps is a more diplomatic U.S. And we also should remember the response from the Europeans has changed. J.D. Vance got booed in Milan at the Winter Olympics. The U.S. delegation also was booed in Davos. So this could be, to some extent, a different, perhaps more polite Munich Security Conference.
OK, Maria, today, and whatever happens, you will, of course, report it for us. Thank you so much for that live update. And as those talks get underway in Munich, with President Zelensky as one of the main guests, airstrikes have knocked out many electricity and heating supplies in Ukraine. Hadja Lahbib, the EU Commissioner for Humanitarian Aid, has announced 1,000 more generators for hospitals, schools and houses amidst constant Russian missiles. Euronews' Shona Murray reports from Kyiv.
Well, Maeve, we're outside these so-called invincibility points. This is places where you can go if your house has lost heat or electricity because it's been bombed. There are often children here. If you look at these high-rise apartments behind me, a lot of them don't have gas installations. So if the house is bombed or if you've lost electricity because of the power plants, then you're in a really bad way. As far as this 4-year full-scale invasion has gone on, it appears that this is the worst winter ever, with temperatures plunging as low as minus 23 degrees. We were at a power plant that was completely destroyed by ballistic missiles, meaning that 500,000 people lost electricity and heat, and that included hospitals and schools. Within a few hours of being here, there was 8 ballistic missile attacks, and at one point, obviously, we had to go down and find shelter with 200 workers near the power plant, where I caught up with EU Commissioner for Crisis Management, Commissioner Lahbib, and I asked her about the situation we were in. We were also joined by the Ukrainian Deputy Minister for the Territories.
You know, we have alarms every day, and for day attacks, Russians tried to use these sub-zero temperatures, making the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine and Kyiv particularly.
We're only in Kyiv a few hours, and you've already met people who are suffering with no heating, and now we're here at a power plant and you're in a shelter. What's your reaction?
My reaction is that this kind of shelter saved lives, and thanks to this shelter, no one was killed, and it happened day and night now, so it shows that this is the real battlefield. Russian aggression is not only, between soldiers. These are the soldiers of energy.
Do you think it's realistic, President Zelensky's demand that maybe there's some sort of partial membership of the EU by 2027? I mean, he's calling for a date.
This is something that we need to consider because we need to move. Ukraine is part of the European Union family, and there are already candidates, and we need to move forwards. And we admire the efforts, because under the war they are able also to move, to reform their governance, their constitutions, their capacities, and I'm sure that we will be only stronger if Ukraine is part of the Union.
I also caught up with Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko. I asked him a little bit about the situation that's ongoing in his city and also about EU membership.
We have massive attack from Russian Federation, kamikaze drone, ballistic missile, cruise missiles, attack our critical infrastructure and let people freezing, living without heating, electricity, and we fighting to surviving. And this help, these electric generators, what we receive right now, is very helpful.
Are you confident about the political negotiations that are ongoing at the moment?
First of all, stop the war. Second, we need guarantee, because it can be short breaks for Russians, and also very important question about the future, because we, Ukraine, have to save our national interest and our main goal to be the part of European family, not the part of Russian Empire.
Shona Murray reporting for us there. Well, the war in Ukraine has made an appearance at the Winter Olympics, with one Ukrainian skeleton racer banned from participating. And for more on that story, I'm joined now here in our studio by our Sasha Vakalina and the EU Commissioner for Sport, Glenn Micallef. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. Just Sasha, first, bring us up to speed. What happened?
Well, Zav was disqualified from the Olympics for using his helmet, and that happened even before his first run. During the trainings, he was using the helmet featuring the portraits. You can see it now on the screen, of the Ukrainian athletes who were killed since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. There are no political slogans on the helmet. There are no flags on the helmet, only the photos of the athletes. And this was the reason, apparently, for the International Olympic Committee to disqualify him. Let's listen to what he had to say after the decision.
You can imagine I'm a professional athlete, and I spent hours of trainings every day for 4 years to be able to be here today to compete on Olympic Games. And I was disqualified, and I cannot understand even why.
Commissioner Micallef, you were there at the Games. What is your view here? We see dreams shattered.
Well, let me just say, first of all, the Winter Olympic Games have been so far a fantastic celebration of sporting excellence, of fair competition, of friendship, and promoting peace. Now, when it comes to the organization and the regulation of sporting events, the autonomy of sporting federations and of associations to regulate these games is a fundamental pillar in sport. So it is for the International Olympic Committee, it is for the federations to set the rules and regulations for the competitions. Now, this is uncontested. What we're talking about here is messaging and messaging rules, particularly that come out of the Olympic Charter. Now, in this particular case, the rule is not directed at a particular country. These are rules to safeguard safety for athletes, but also fair competition. And I emphasize this point. I am sad to see that Vladislav and the situation could not be resolved before the competition.
When you say messaging, what message does that say to Ukrainians?
Well, let me just finish the point. I'm sad to see that the situation could not be resolved before the competition. I think, in a way that would have allowed him to express himself and pay respect to the fallen heroes in Ukraine. Ukraine is going through a very tough time. We've just seen in the previous message the difficult situation that Ukraine is going through. But the decision by the IOC is one I respect, and I respect particularly the fact that Kirsty Coventry, the president of the International Olympic Committee, was speaking to Vladislav face to face, explaining the situation, trying to resolve the dispute through dialogue. I also admire the fact that she made an extraordinary, in the event of the extraordinary situation, made an appeal to the disciplinary committee also to revoke the accreditation and restore the accreditation.
So it's not over yet?
To Vladislav. And of course, I appeal for engagement and dialogue.
Commissioner Micallef and Sasha Vakalina, thank you so much for being with us here this morning. But now for something completely different. It is Valentine's Day this weekend, a day that some people love and some people hate. But it did get us thinking about the serious demographic crisis that the EU is facing. Our Jakob Janis takes a look.
Valentine's Day is coming, and I'm pretty sure you know that. But do you know that Europe is running out of babies? Look, your reporter is not here to lecture you on whether to have children. That's a personal choice. But if you're planning to discuss it with your loved one this weekend, let's look at the numbers together and without the pressure. Europeans are waiting longer to have children, and there is no sign it will change anytime soon. But here is the twist. Delaying parenthood doesn't necessarily mean giving up on children. In fact, the EU countries where women wait the longest also happen to be the countries with higher fertility rates. That might explain the explosion in fertility treatments, which allow couples to extend their window of opportunity. And according to recent data, Europe recorded around 1 million treatment cycles in a single year. So the desire is clearly there. In fact, most Europeans still say their ideal family size is 2 children. But sometimes they simply cannot afford it. Over a third of Hungarians cite financial limits as the main barrier to have children, while 30% of Italians blame job insecurity. But throwing state money at the problem doesn't always work. Despite massive pronatal public spending, births in Poland have almost halved since 1990. And as for Hungary, last year they saw the lowest number of babies born ever. And on the other side of the globe, South Korea is even more desperate. The government is paying new couples just to date. So if you are dating this weekend, with or without the intention to procreate, just remember, some countries would happily pay for your dinner. But hey, don't bring it up on the first date. It's kind of a mood killer.
Jakob Janis there. And finally, as we reported yesterday, it's just 2 months until Hungary's big elections. And incumbent Prime Minister Viktor Orban is running against the 44-year-old centre-right opposition leader Peter Magyar. Well, overnight, there's been some developments on that sex tape that we mentioned just yesterday. For more, our Hungarian correspondent Sándor is in the studio. Sándor, what's the latest?
Yes, indeed. Yesterday, Peter Magyar, the opposition leader, admitted that the sex tape is real and he's on it with his former girlfriend, Evelyn Fogel. This happened 1.5 years ago when they visited a party in central Budapest in an apartment, and Peter Magyar said that they engaged in a consensual sex. And he said also that this was a honey trap. He has been lured into this. He also talked about drugs have been used at this party, but he never touched any drugs. Now the big question is whether or not this will impact the Hungarian electoral campaign. Everyone is talking about this in Hungary right now. Maybe let's take a look of what Peter Magyar had to say yesterday.
It became clear to me that I walked into a classic Russian-style honey trap. But since I haven't done anything illegal, my conscience is clean.
Peter Magyar there. And to find out if this is impacting his campaign, you can read Sándor Zíros's reports on euronews.com. But this does bring this edition of Europe Today to an end. Thank you so much for your company. As always, take care and see you very soon here on Euronews.